Hello, here we go. Hi everybody, welcome to Rocky River Library. We're doing a forum tonight on plastics in Lake Erie, and it's a program that is co-sponsored by the Sierra Club and Case Western Reserve University Siegel Lifelong Learning and the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland and Ideastream and the Rocky River High School Environmental Club, Cleveland.com, and the Bay Village Green Team. And what I'd like to do is introduce our moderator this evening. She's Elizabeth Miller, who is Ideastream's environmental reporter. She covers environmental issues across Northeast Ohio. She also reports for Great Lakes Today, a collaboration of public radio stations in the Great Lakes region. Her pieces have aired nationally on programs including NPR's All Things Considered, Marketplace, and Here and Now. And here's Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good? Okay. All right, so we're here to talk about plastics in Lake Erie, as everyone knows. And so I just wanted to start with our panelists here. I'd like to have you all introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about the organization you're here representing and what role you play in the plastics conversation. Jill, we'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Jill Bartolotta, and I'm an educator for Ohio Sea Grant. We're affiliated with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and then the Ohio State University. And our focus is to work with coastal communities to address natural resource issues along Lake Erie and then also to help promote sustainable economic development.
Crystal?
Good evening. My name is Crystal Davis. I am Policy Director at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We are a regional organization based in Chicago with 5 offices throughout the Great Lakes state. And I have the privilege of managing our Ohio presence based here in Cleveland, working largely on Lake Erie issues, everything from policy to volunteerism to green infrastructure.
Hello, my name is Erin Huber, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Drink Local, Drink Tap. We're based in Ohio City and Cleveland and also in Uganda. Here we focus on water education and activism, and globally we focus on building water access points for people in rural villages.
So you've heard a little bit from our panelists, and we'll get into questions, but I just want to say there will be cards. If you all have questions, I think you might have some already, and we'll answer those kind of throughout the event. And don't worry, we'll definitely talk about House Bill 625. So just to start, kind of to give us a baseline about how prevalent is plastic in Lake Erie, and is this problem worse here than it is in other lakes? Crystal, I know your organization does a lot of tracking of this.
Sure. Plastic pollution is a huge issue throughout the Great Lakes. Just for point of reference, our Adopt a Beach program, a little bit about it, we have teams of volunteers who find their own folks and volunteer to go out and clean up the beach. Now, anybody can go out and clean up the beach. What's unique about our program is that we actually chart what we find and share that information with researchers to guide social awareness campaigns. And so we're really looking at what we're finding. It was amazing to know that 89% of what we found on beaches throughout the Great Lakes was plastic related. Either it was partially plastic or completely plastic. And for Ohio, it was 93%. And so most of it, if you look at the top 10 items that we're finding on the beach, number 1 is plastic pieces, because every P I say for the rest of the night is going to sound like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the top 10 things that we find on the beach, number 1 was plastic pieces. And so as we know, plastic doesn't go away. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's number 1 for Ohio. That's throughout the Great Lakes states, but also for Ohio. And then number 2 was cigarette butts. So number 1 was plastic pieces at 30%. Number 2 was cigarette butts at 15%, which also contains little particles of plastic. And the third was cigar tips at 11%, and that is for Ohio. And so it's a huge issue throughout the Great Lakes and in Ohio as well, a major concern.
Okay, and Jill, I know you've done some research about specifically in Cleveland here. What kind of plastic is most prevalent?
So just like Crystal said, we're really going to find these plastic pieces because those are going to be larger plastic items that break down. But really a big issue for us is going to be these smoking-related materials. And out of all the Great Lakes states, Ohio is #1 for the cigar tips. They make up a big portion of our smoking litter profile. And really the reason we think that is we just have a population that smokes cigar tips. These are going to be a younger population. You tend to see that in cities. But then also we have combined sewer overflows. And so that takes anything from the roads or landscape directly into the nearby river or lake. And cigar tips, as well as cigarettes, they're small pieces of plastic, so they're able to get through the storm drains and get directly out into the lake.
And so adding to this problem, we've seen a lot of headlines about plastic in fish from the lake, plastic in our water, even plastic in our beer. What are the potential health impacts of all this plastic, Erin?
So obviously none of us want to be drinking or eating plastic, I assume, but we do it every day. And so there are ways that we can minimize this from happening. Plastics are not only dangerous, just eating or drinking the plastic, but also what is attracted to that plastic in the water in the lake, for example. A lot of toxins or heavy metals can be attracted to those plastics and end up in your fish or your water, or your children are playing in it at the beach. So it's not only what you're eating through food, the plastic pieces, but what gets attached to that.
And is it known, any of you, about how that might impact us if we ingest that?
So the studies on humans are being conducted right now. It was just discovered that plastic is found in our feces, so we know that it enters our body but also is excreted through our body. And studies have been done on other animals. So for example, there's been studies conducted on zooplankton. Those are the microscopic animals that are really the basis of our food chain. It's shown that it affects their reproductive behavior, growth behavior, and feeding behavior. Studies on fish that have shown to have plastic in their system, plastic most in their brain. We once thought the membrane between our brain to be impenetrable, but there are nanoplastics that are able to penetrate into organisms' brains. It affects their feeding behavior, growth behavior, but it also causes that fish to slow down, making it more susceptible to being eaten by a predator. And so as far as mammals go, we don't know the health implications yet, but we do know that the plastics leached from chemical are endocrine disrupting and also carcinogenic.
As Erin said, no one wants plastic in their water or their beer. And so I wanted to hear a little bit from you all about some of the initiatives going on around the city and around the county to try and reduce or solve this problem, or at least reduce our impact on this.
I'm going to start with policy. You can talk about look here. You like how we're strategizing? What do you want to talk about? There's so much going on. I figure you talk about Adopt a Beach.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I can start there. So to piggyback on what Crystal was talking about earlier, our organization, Drink Local, Drink Tap, has been an Adopt a Beach team via the Alliance for the Great Lakes since 2010. So we were cleaning up specifically Edgewater Beach and Perkins Beach at Edgewater Park since 2010, since the state park system was managing that area. And I can tell you that everything Crystal is saying is true. In addition to that, we find a ton of disposable, like fast food plastic wrappers, Dorito bags, disposable bottled water bottles, all of those things. They're coming from our neighborhoods, they're coming from our trash cans, they're coming from people throwing them on the ground. They're there, people are buying them, they end up in our lake, and we're picking it up. It's a huge problem, and that's actually like those are the bigger items we pick up these days. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the tiny plastics you were talking about earlier, you don't really see those, and they're not as fun to pick up at the beach, so many of them are not being counted.
And anecdotally, have you been seeing less plastic when you're picking up at the beaches every year? Or?
At Edgewater Park, we have, because Cleveland Metro Parks that manages it now has, they have 2 beach combers. So they're out there every day combing the beach. What they can't pick up with the combers is the small plastics. So we're still finding a lot of that small plastics on the beach, but then up in the tree lines, rocky areas, and at Perkins Beach at Edgewater, we still find the tires, the bottled water, all of those things.
In addition to weighing in on policy issues at all levels of government, we also see part of our job is that of a translator. I feel like it's my personal passion to connect people to policy. And so, we can go to the State House, we can go to County Council, but if we're not connecting everyday citizens to how this impacts their lives, then why are we doing this work? And so at the Alliance this year, we created a plastic toolkit, which can be found on our website, greatlakes.org, where we basically outline some of the major threats and some of the lay of the land in terms of plastics in our lakes, and then go on to really draw out how and spell out how you can become a water advocate, and how to connect with the legislators, how to connect with media. And so that's something that I'm really proud of. We also sponsored a webinar to launch that toolkit. What I think is unique about our webinars is we rid it of a lot of the insider jargon. We have to be a mirror for ourselves to talk about why is it so difficult for other non-environmentalists to get into the fold and really get inspired about these topics? Is because a lot of times they don't know what the heck we're talking about. And so when we simplify these complex issues, whether it's plastics in Lake Erie or algae blooms or water affordability or infrastructure, when we really break them down and connect the dots on how it impacts people's everyday lives, then they want to get inspired and want to get involved. And so that's what we do on our webinars, is really break it all the way down to layman's terms, and then always end with a call to action so folks know how they can really impact change.
So I definitely want to get to how to bring non-environmentalists into the fold a little bit later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this current issue with House Bill 625, this ban on bans. And just to give some background on this for those who aren't in the loop, which is okay, the legislation just passed the Ohio House, and it's aimed at places like Cuyahoga County that have introduced legislation that implements a plastic bag fee or a plastic bag ban. And I know we're here with a lot of people who are on one side of the argument, so since there's no one here on the panel representing the opposition, I do want to break down a couple of those arguments before we get into the issue. So some of the people that support this House Bill 625, a few of their points. Fees or bans would create a patchwork of regulations around the state. They would place a burden on big businesses. And a third argument, actually coming from a Democrat in Cleveland, is that this kind of fee or ban would have a greater impact on low-income Ohioans. And Crystal, I know you've done a lot with policy work, and I mean you're the policy director at Alliance for the Great Lakes. But this is happening at a time when cities and whole countries are introducing single-use plastic bans and fees. So what does this mean for the state and for Lake Erie if the Ohio Senate passes this legislation and it actually becomes law in Ohio?
I see it as problematic, mostly because it really ties the hands of local government to do what's right for their municipality. And so I understand the arguments against for the legislation. We stood in opposition to the legislation and submitted testimony. At the end of the day, we have to start somewhere. And I'm saying that about so many pieces of legislation that at all levels of government. Listen, we cannot tie the hands of our local legislators to implement legislation that could remedy these issues or discourage the use of plastics at the local level. I fully admit that I'm biased. I know there are arguments saying that this would negatively impact low-income residents. I came from a low-income family, and my mom worked at Aldi's for 25 years. I never saw groceries in a bag. At Aldi's, you have to pay for your bag. that was not a problem for anybody in my neighborhood. And I know I can't speak for them as some monolithic group here, but we walked out of the grocery store every day with a box of groceries, or we brought our own bags. And that was a way of life for us in a very poor neighborhood in Akron. And so I realize my bias, and I admit to that. But I see this as problematic as we start to tie the hands. It's a slippery tie the hands of local government. It's a slippery slope, and the needs of local residents are not going to be addressed.
And Erin, I know you've got a stack of papers with you that you showed us earlier. Could you talk a little bit about that and your experience in countries that have implemented bans like this?
Sure. So just to branch off into the global conversation of plastic bag bans for a minute, I work in East Africa, and I work in Uganda. My neighbor, Rwanda, had a genocide in the 90s. Your bag gets checked at the airport for plastic bags. They will throw out your plastic bags when you enter the country. So if a country like Rwanda can make this decision just to say, no, we don't want our country full of garbage, I'm pretty sure the state of Ohio or Cuyahoga County, who I know Sunny has tried very hard to convince, I'm sure that we can do this. Over 60 countries have introduced bag bans and are implementing them. The first country to ever start banning bags was Bangladesh in 2002 because they had massive flooding because of how many plastic bags were on the streets of Bangladesh. So really, almost 2019, it's almost a shame on us to not be paying attention to all of these, the straw bans, the bag bans, the bottle bans. I mean, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that this is on the table.
And when I was researching this, I completely forgot about the whole conversation about microbeads that happened just a few years ago. And I just wanted to ask the panel, what is it about microbeads? They were banned federally and also affected businesses. What do you think it is about that compared to this plastic bag conversation? And is there anything to be learned for people like yourselves that are fighting for this?
So the microbead legislation really came from the health community. The beads that were in your toothpaste were being embedded in gums, and so dentists were having to surgically remove them. And so that's really where the outcry with microbeads began. And then it really took off on social media with the youth community when they found out there was plastic in their beauty products. And then it was a bipartisan federal bill. Senator Portman was one of the people on this bill. And it moved through legislation very quickly, and much quicker than I've seen any other type of legislation move forward. And I think it's because there was this direct link between microbeads and our drinking water. And Lake Erie is the drinking water for 13 million people. Plastic bags also do affect our drinking water and the health of our local organisms. However, that link I don't think is as direct. And so that's where I see this issue coming about.
Does anybody else want to?
Just touching on the microbead thing for a minute, I think I used the analogy earlier about climate change and plastic bags, right? It's really hard to wrap your head around climate change, but it's pretty easy to wrap your head around, okay, if we stop using plastic bags or use them minimally, this is the outcome. Most cities see an 80 to 90% drop in plastic bag pollution. With the microbeads, it's really easy to tie that to a product, whereas plastic bags are more general in use across different grocery stores, clothing stores, different places. So maybe it's harder to wrap our heads around it. I don't know.
And the other pro part of the microbead legislation is the private companies actually remove the beads from their products beforehand because of consumer outcry. And they do have alternatives to put in their products, or they found out that the plastic was not needed in the product. We're not seeing that. There are reusable alternatives for bags, but the bag industry has the Plastic Bag Alliance backing them and funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into lobbying for these bans on auxiliary containers, which is this House Bill 625.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the interests that are behind this?
So the Plastic Bag Alliance is funded by the plastics industry. They are a nationwide alliance. They have backed these same bills in many other states. The National Law Office for the Sea Grant program, we actually put a memo together talking about all the other similar bills happening around the country. We also talk about the cities or states that are moving forward and banning these plastic items. So that is outside, but these are called preemption laws, and that's what's happening in Ohio. Florida has moved forward with it, New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. There are other communities moving forward with it, but then you have places like Seattle, California, who are taking steps forward and trying to ban these single-use plastics. But there's a lot of money in the plastics industry, much more there than in any of these conservation organizations that are trying to fight these bills.
And so just to switch over to something that has gotten a little more traction, especially here locally. Jill, I know you're part of the Sustainable Cleveland Plastic Reduction Working Group. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've been working with the Skip the Straws, so switching from bags to straws. Could you talk a little bit about that campaign? Have you seen? Well, you've probably seen more success with that than you have with the plastic bag issue, right?
Yes, and this is really just coming down to people who are interested in this issue, whether it be local green teams or watershed groups or the zoo or the metro parks. We all are working together with the Plastic Reduction Working Group, and we're moving forward with Skip the Straws. Straws became a hot button issue when that turtle video went viral. It was really a very haunting image of what happens to our plastic when it gets into our wildlife friends. And so that's really how straws became a very hot button issue. And so we're working with restaurants, and right now no one's governing them saying they have to do this. It's just restaurants doing it because they understand that it's the right thing to do, but also because their clientele are responding in a positive way. And so the Skip the Straw is working. I've met with someone in Ashtabula, and there were no straws in their restaurant, and I say, how did you learn about this? And it was because of the work of the reduction group. And we're actually, I'm taking what I've learned in the city of Cleveland, and we're actually going to be doing this out at Put-in-Bay, trying to get straws reduced in restaurants out at Put-in-Bay. And so hopefully that program will be successful. The restaurants are on board, and they're very excited to move forward with these initiatives. It's saving them money. If you don't put a straw in every drink, that's more money in their pocket. Straws still should be available, though. There are some people who require them for medical needs, but they should not be given freely in every beverage.
Okay. Let's go to a question from the audience. Shake things up here a little bit. So getting into recycling, which is another huge local issue these days, how have the recent changes in recycling affected plastic in the lake recently? Have you? I mean, it might be. Can anyone?
Do you want me to? Yeah. So, first of all, our country has never had a good recycling program. If you look at places like Norway, they have phenomenal recycling programs. I think it's because they're small and they have limited resources, so they have to figure out how to manage their waste. We recycle 10% of what can be recycled. Everything else goes to landfill or ends up in the natural environment. When Asia stopped taking our recyclable materials, recycling collapsed across the country. These plastics are sitting in ports, taking up space, or they're going directly to landfill. If you live in Cuyahoga County, you can recycle water bottles and things like laundry detergent tubs, and that's it. All other plastic goes to landfill. And so really, we don't have a recycling infrastructure anymore in this community. So is it affecting and getting more plastics into the natural environment? I can't answer to that, but definitely more plastic is going to landfill, which causes a whole nother slew of issues. Our landfills are filling up, and then so where do we put new landfills? We put them in your backyard, we put them in natural green space areas. And so really, the answer to this issue is not recycling. The answer to this issue is rethinking how you use plastic in your everyday life, because these plastics are not being recycled, and that's just that's the truth, at least for our country.
And I guess you kind of answered the second part of this question, which is what can be done to increase or restore plastic recycling. We're kind of past the point of restoring things. It's kind of just a matter of reusing or reducing.
Yeah, first it's refusing.
Refusing.
And then it's reducing.
Starts with an R.
Then it's recycling or repurposing or reusing. So, and also the reality of recycling is plastics get recycled into a a material that is of lesser quality. So for example, your water bottle does not become a water bottle. It most likely becomes a plastic bag. A recycled plastic bag does not become a plastic bag. It most likely gets recycled into plastic lumber. And so these plastics can only be recycled so far. So it's not a life cycle that is sustainable.
Erin, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Sorry, thought I read your face.
I actually do. I think that it's hard when we're trying to get more people involved in this. It's hard for them to see themselves making a big impact just because they've refused a straw one time at a restaurant. But I like to say that it's a series of good decisions. It's like being on a diet. You can't eat a salad. Well, maybe you can eat a salad these days and lose weight. But you can't eat a salad and all of a sudden you've lost weight, right? It's a series of good decisions, one good decision after another good decision. And that's the same thing with plastic reduction. If you want to see an impact, if you want to create change, it's going to be making a decision to not take a straw at a restaurant, making a decision to use real plates on Christmas or Hanukkah. And so that is how we make change. And it's hard because you can't see that on a daily basis.
And that's a great point. Thanks, Crystal. And it's you, but then it could possibly be 300 million other people. And if 300 million people refuse one straw every day, that adds up over time. So it's a large group of people making these decisions independently of one another, but that does create great change.
And I just wanted to make a clarification for someone. So the ban that House Bill 625, the ban on auxiliary container bans or fees in municipalities, is not in effect, but it just passed the House, has not really been mentioned in the Senate for a while, right?
So there was
the companion bill,
right?
Yes.
There was a similar bill that was they tried to pass. I believe it was this late spring, early summer. It did not pass the Senate, so this bill still has to get passed through the Senate. If the Senate passes it, it still needs to go to the governor for final approval or veto.
And I mean, do any of you want to speak on the likelihood of it passing? Do you?
It moved. They're in lame duck right now, so
Right.
things are moving very quickly. And so, and the money is behind this, and I just feel like the people who are speaking out against it, they just don't really have time to get organized and get down there. And so really the force of people that need to speak out against this, they're just not present at this time.
Yeah, and I think that legislators just aren't seeing a groundswell of support against the legislation. They aren't. I know that we've sponsored, opposition testimony and spoke with legislators, but one of the things I'm super passionate about now is it can't just be us. This is what's happening on so many pieces of environmental and water-related legislation at all levels of government. Well, the environmentalists will take care of that. They're going to go down. They're going to fight for that. Well, who else is impacted? The health community is impacted. The business community is impacted. I need somebody to go to the State House with me, And so it's not going to be. We're not going to start to see the things that we want to see until we have all industries banding together and speaking with a unified voice on a shared water agenda. At all levels of government. And so I think there is a high likelihood that this bill passes. It's not in its first hearing. If you look at lame duck session, there's a slew of bills that are heard for the first time just so they can get a hearing out of the way and say that they were heard at least once during this lame duck session. But when bills are put up for possible vote, it's probably a high likelihood of passage. And so we need people to speak up. We need people to join us at the State House. We need people to call their legislators. And it can't be the same faces because, quite honestly, when we walk into a State House office, they already know what we're going to say. They know who we are. They know what we stand for. They know we're water champions. And we need more people to be water champions because they're impacted by these proposals as well.
And just one more thing, if you hadn't read any of the recent articles that came out about this, we just posted something on our Drink Local Drink Tap Facebook page today that lists all of the people in the House that voted for the ban on bans. So feel free to look at those names.
And so kind of going along with what we've been talking about, all the special interests and the businesses that are kind of backing this legislation with their wallet. Do we need to treat this less as an environmental problem and more as a political problem?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think we're being very short-sighted if we only look at the environmental impact. We have to look at all sides of these issues, and that's, again, plastics in Lake Erie or algae blooms or affordability or infrastructure or whatever water issue it is. We have to look at all sides of the issue, and so we can bring the most people together. In such a contentious political climate across this country, water should be the unifier. And I know it sounds really cliche, but who's against water? Well, now we have a list of people, right? Yeah. And so I think that water should be the unifier. This should be something that really transcends political affiliation and age and race and socioeconomics. This is what should be bringing our country together. And so our job now is going to be depoliticizing something that should have never been politicized in the first place.
And the issue with plastic is it's so new. I mean, plastic has only been on this planet for 60 years, and every plastic item that's ever been created is still here. So we're still learning how it responds in the environment, how it responds in our bodies, and so we don't have all this data and science behind this issue that we really need. What we do have is we do have the stories from communities saying there's garbage blocking my sewers and they flood into my house. We have the economic data saying that if you clean your beaches, your tourism dollars will go up. It costs money to have trash in our natural environment, whether to clean it up or bringing people to our communities. And so we have that information, and so that's what we really need to lead with, while the rest of more of these health implications for us will follow.
And talking about making this not a political issue, I think about all of the drama with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and how, the politicians in this region came out in droves on both sides of the aisle to support this. What is it about plastic? I mean, we've covered this. What is it about plastic that's different? Yeah.
There's
data.
There's lack of data,
Okay.
and there's a lot of money behind the groups who want to keep plastic around. I mean, face it, if you get rid of plastic bags in grocery stores, a whole industry of plastic production is going to collapse. That's the truth.
And also, I mean, the dollars that have been invested in this specific ban on bans, it's been about $12,000 from environmental groups and $600,000 from the plastics industry. So who do you think is going to win that one? We really have to make the decisions every day as consumers, no matter what happens, to take this into our own hands and do the right thing.
In this question, which state legislators are quote unquote owned by the plastics lobby? I was going to say you could go to the Drink Local Drink Tap's Facebook page, but I would do some more research on who specifically is getting that money. We do not have that information right now unless anyone wants to name drop.
Not on the tip of my tongue.
Okay. Then just
our campaign finance reports.
Exactly. Sounds like a good job for me. Okay, so not just talking to local legislators, but this question asks: do you recommend citizens contacting local retailers directly, Mark's, Target, Giant Eagle, and pressure them to stop using plastic bags?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, please do it. Every single person in this room, the next store you go to, talk to the manager, write a letter, please.
Mm-hmm. And it is challenging. I am trying to work with a grocery store right now to do some research, and I'm getting the runaround. But you're consumers, and they'll listen to you. Kroger, by I believe 2020 is going to phase out plastic bags from their stores, and that was a decision they made. They're not being forced by any government regulations to do that. It's a private company decision.
Well, and with the Krogers, I have a feeling that these bigger national chains of organizations, they operate in some states where bags are banned. So if they're going to ban in one place, do it the whole way so that their operations are more efficient, right? And they're probably saving a ton of money.
Yes, again, if you do not give every single person 10 bags for their 2 egg cartons, you will save money. I'm just being honest.
Uh-oh, she had a flashback.
I mean,
But yes, and just one more thing, to the younger people, especially in this room, nobody wants to hear from us old people in the room. They want to hear from you. This is what I was doing when I was your age. Oh my gosh, am I getting old? This is what I was doing, and people listen. They can't turn away from you. They can turn away from us and ignore our calls and our emails and think, oh, this is another angry adult. But they'll listen to you, and I'm staring at you too because I can see you.
And a question from the audience talking about the straws. Can we go back to paper straws? I know I've been at some restaurants that have started using those.
yes. However, there are limits to some of these alternatives. So, for example, we'll start with paper. Paper, when you create paper, it is more costly on the environment, and transportation costs are more because paper is heavier. So you're using more fossil fuels to get the product from one place to another. When paper gets in the natural environment, though, it will break down into small paper particles. We don't have information saying whether or not they're harmful for organisms, but most likely not. It's paper, it's a cellulose product. Whereas when plastic gets into the environment, it is much more environmentally harmful, but the production of plastic is actually better than paper. So that's a trade-off that you need to consider, and this is the same with paper bags. Everyone's like, let's go back to paper bags. Ooh, you know, you have to think about those costs up front. Paper straws do have their limits. When there's one company, to my knowledge, they have the best paper straw, but it will disintegrate after a couple of hours. These companies moving towards compostable or biodegradable, I'm putting those in quotes because really they are not compostable or biodegradable unless they go to an industrial composter. Not every community has industrial composting facilities. Cuyahoga County, we do. However, they're very small productions, and there is a cost associated with having someone compost your goods. And there is a high contamination rate because some of these products still do have plastic in them. They're not truly biodegradable or compostable. And these straws, when they sit out in the sunlight, I've been told by restaurant patrons that they melt in your drink if they're in direct sun. So yes, there are alternatives. The alternatives I would suggest if you are someone who loves your straws is invest in glass or metal straws, but then make sure you properly clean your straws because bacteria contamination inside the straw is a health concern.
Yeah, I believe that.
One last just quick fun fact on the plastic bag too is you could move to paper, right? It breaks down more quickly. A plastic but I don't suggest that. I suggest bringing your own. But a plastic bag takes anywhere between 20 and 1,000 years to break down, depending on what environment it's left in. So,
and it doesn't become anything useful. It becomes smaller and smaller pieces of plastic that never ever go away.
On to balloons. Is any work being done locally to eliminate balloon releases that you know of?
Oh, I was taking an awkward drink of water.
Oh, no, I mean you.
No, it's okay. I remember last year there was a group of people at Edgewater trying to plan a water balloon event. And being friends with Cleveland Metro Parks, I said, hey, is this a registered, legal event that you approved? And I doubted it, and it wasn't. But people are still doing this stuff that we did when we were kids and we didn't know better. But
whole cities did.
Whole cities are doing it. Sure. They're doing the throwing lanterns into the air and they're burning off into Neverland. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? We've got to come up with something better, more fun to do than having balloon events.
And did that event go on?
No.
Oh, because you inquired about it? Do you know? Or
I'll take credit for it, maybe. No, I don't really know why, but I think a string of things happened.
And
gotcha.
To my knowledge, in the Great Lakes, I'm not familiar. I believe Toledo has a balloon release ban ordinance, so local municipalities can move towards that. You're going to see this more commonly along the ocean coast because balloons look like jellyfish. Jellyfish are one of sea turtles' favorite foods. So they have charismatic megafauna, sea turtles and dolphins and sharks and whales that are eating these balloons. And so that's a bit more of a driving force for legislation along the coast. However, there are other things you can do to balloon releases. Plant a native tree, do a beach cleanup in honor of someone. Balloon releases are a very touchy subject because usually when they happen, someone is going through a period of sadness, and so approaching them, I've never done it, but I know people who have done it, really just is not the appropriate time to do it when people are really so upset about something else.
Right.
But I'm not aware of any legislation that is being moved forward on balloons. We set the record for releasing balloons in, the 80s?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
No, and my apologies. I didn't even know that's why people did balloon releases sometimes.
That's usually it's in honor of a loved one who's passed.
I didn't mean to make light
It's
of
okay.
it. But
It's okay. And people use them for fun too, like water balloon
right.
tosses and stuff like that. But
So something that I have a couple questions here, but something that I want to get to, and Crystal touched on earlier, is bringing in people that aren't in this room. Just looking around, personally, I don't see a lot of people of color in this room, and that's something that I always think about when I'm doing these environment stories. And so I guess I just wanted to ask, Crystal, I know you've made this a really big part of your job at Alliance for the Great Lakes. How do we get the word out? How do we get people involved that aren't here tonight?
I think the key to authentic, I will say authentic, the key to authentic community engagement is listening to the community first. And so when I started in this job at the Alliance about 2.5 years ago, the first thing I asked for was data on how minorities in Cleveland felt about these water issues or environmental issues, and there was not a lot of data around. And I realized that I was working in a city that was 53.3% just Black, 67% minority. And so we went on a tour, listening tour, community conversations where we listened to people and talk about what they cared about. And so what we heard was that they cared about blight in their communities. They cared about violence and crime. Those were things that were priority issues. They were very frank with me in saying that, Crystal, water issues are important, but those are luxury issues. If I'm worried about my kid walking to school, if I'm scared that my kid is gonna get shot, if I'm scared that I won't have food for my kid to eat breakfast in the morning, I can't worry about plastics in Lake Erie or the threat of an algae bloom in the western basin of Lake Erie. And so with these being luxury issues, to them, I had to think about how I connect to them. And so when you're authentically engaged in the community and you're listening to them, I was able to connect and find synergies between their priorities and my objectives at the Alliance. Oh, you care about water affordability? That's important to you? Well, let's talk about how plastics that are in your neighborhood go down into the storm drains and how the aging infrastructure that's already strained has to, we have to get rid of all this debris that's found in the neighborhood. And what does that cost? How is that driving up cost? You want to talk about property values in your neighborhood? Did you know that when there's debris and plastic trash in your neighborhood, your property values go down 7%? The cleanliness of your neighborhood dictates behavior and has an impact on crime. And so you have to listen to people and find synergies between what you care about and what they care about. And there are some areas of mutual interest. And then once you have that, it's about maintaining that connection and not being, you parachute in, you talk about this issue, and then you never engage the community again. People are tired of that. There are so many competing interests. I work with youth too, and we had a community conversation with youth. And they're saying, listen, there are a million things you're telling me I should care about. But until you marry it with things that they care about, your objectives with things they care about, they can't continue to be engaged in that issue. And so I think that's the key to me walking into rooms like this and seeing more faces that look like mine. This is important. We cannot keep isolating these issues to affluent white communities, whether that's plastic reduction or algae or any of these water issues. And it's not just about race. It's about, like I said before, having health folks come to the room. There should be, when we have a gathering like this, there should be people of color. There should be people from the health community. There should be people from yacht owners to the people who only care about Lake Erie because they are one of the 11 million people that depend on it for their drinking water. And so that's how we start to change the narrative around water issues.
And we have a couple questions about the youth here, and I know Crystal. I don't know if Great Lakes in My World is still active as much, but I mean, a little bit. Yeah, just a couple questions. What, if any, programs are active in our schools to educate the youth about the importance of not littering? First question. How are schools involved in teaching about environmental issues, starting with elementary level? And I know you're an extension educator.
Right. Sure. We have developed our own curriculum, Great Lakes in My World, where we work directly with teachers who then take our curriculum into their classroom and talk about the Great Lakes. And then they also, we provide support so that they can have outdoors, hands-on experience at the lakes for those teachers. We're phasing out that program because we're going to start working directly with youth groups in communities. Okay. We want to get a little bit closer in and start to work with these youth groups that have students in their out-of-school time.
All right. Yeah.
And I can just tag on that. Since 2010, we've reached about 12,000 students in Northeast Ohio with our Wavemaker program. So this is typically anywhere between 4th and 12th grade, with a very nice sweet spot in 5th through 7th grade. And what we do is we have a speaker from our organization come in, talk about local and global water issues, and then the students decide how they want to become wave makers in the world. And that is, there are a few simple steps that we teach them about, which is plastic reduction, volunteering at one of our beach cleanups or cleaning up around their school if transportation's an issue, and then also raising funds to help other kids get safe water in Africa. So it's this local to global kind of action plan that we do with the children.
And Jill, so everyone's got a little role here.
So part of my role with Extension and Sea Grant is to go out into communities and speak to people about these issues. So I'm frequently in schools or bringing students to the lake, and one of the topics I talk to them about is plastic pollution and ways they can change their behavior to have a positive effect on the natural environment.
And there was a part of this question about not littering, and I know, schools, my job, everyone has the bins, the recycling bins. How is there a part of your curriculum, your plan, where you explain how to recycle properly? I know that's a big topic.
So I think getting back to what you were saying earlier, really we talk very little about recycling and more about only buying real things or buying only what you need. And throughout the year, all year on our social media, you'll always see us talking about buying only what you need, buying real things, using real things, because plastic pollutes. So the recycling conversation comes at the very, very end, but students are very aware that it's not recycling forever, it's downcycling and eventually a landfill or something along those terms. So.
Lots of questions about littering. Could there be a big anti-littering campaign, or have you seen or experienced something like that?
Well, I feel like littering is illegal. So, really, we've been telling people not to litter forever. It happens on accident sometime. It's windy, things blow around. Really, I think it's more important put lids on your trash cans and make sure they're on well so that animals can't get into them or the wind can't blow it over. Also, I see trash fly off of dump trucks or garbage trucks all the time when I drive down the freeway, every single time, and I count the litter, do a little study. And we have programs where people are on the roadways picking up litter, people are going to beaches picking up litter. So the mentality is there. It's just whether or not you choose to litter or not. And studies have shown that if there is already litter in place somewhere, people are more likely to litter. So that's why it's so important to do these cleanups, because people may say, oh, there's no other litter on the ground, I will take mine with me elsewhere. And then also making sure if we have waste receptacles that they're properly managed, because it's great if everyone's trying to throw their takeout food containers in this garbage can, but when this garbage can is overflowing, they're not going to take it with them. They're going to place it around the outside of it where animals will move it or wind or water will move it. So
I just wanted to touch on that. So, you know, people I've heard comment in different tones that sometimes they don't really appreciate that there's more litter in poor areas. Well, in poorer areas of town, people are mostly traveling by foot or by public means. They're not in their vehicle putting their trash here. And if there are no trash cans being kept up or trash pickup services or anything like that, how do you expect that to improve? Yeah. So just something to think about.
So it's a behavior and mindset issue, but it's also an infrastructure and waste management issue. So you can only do so much as an individual. Companies and industry need to step up at some point.
That takes us to our next audience question. It actually works really well. How would you suggest Cleveland corporate offices reduce their waste? So workplaces implementing things.
I think it's the same. You're talking about internally?
Yeah. I believe it's. I
think it's the same thing that we need to do at our homes. I mean, if you go to the Alliance offices, there are real plates. When we have, and it was really different coming from a huge university and working where there was like all these plastic utensils at lunchtime, and it was my first day of work. And I came in and I was all excited about my new job, and I went out to get lunch, and I came back and I had the styrofoam container and my plastic fork, my styrofoam cup with the lid, and the straw. And I looked around the table, and everybody had a real plate, a glass, and real utensils. And I'm like, oh, no, not on my first day. And so, I mean, I was shamed into doing the right thing, but whatever it takes. And so now those are practices that I've adopted in my office here and at home. And so I think that's what we need to do. It's just changing the behavior, even in city government, whatever government. I think if internally there is a push towards using real dishes and washing the dishes and reusing them over time, we'll see a cost savings, and you can start to model the behavior you like to see throughout the city.
And so I call them audits. You do like a waste audit, whether it's individually or at your business. And the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District has a great program working with businesses to rethink their waste, to better manage their waste. They also have a zero waste event planning guide. So if you're a business that does a lot of conferences or large meetings or events, they have a wonderful guide. And those are all available on their Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District. And so that's where I would direct any businesses that are looking to reduce waste.
And I just have to throw in a tiny thing here. I mean, we are Drink Local, Drink Tap. Please stop serving bottled water at your meetings. Please. We don't need it anymore. We have wonderful water here. Filter it, do what you want, but use real things in your meetings. And the second thing I want to just mention, it's not plastic related, but it could be a huge waste reduction thing, would be doing composting in your offices. There's a wonderful local composting company, Rust Belt Riders, that can help with that food waste. So, and a lot of people pay per poundage in their garbage out of their buildings, so that could also save companies money.
Okay. And then another question about corporate and consumers. Do you believe the consumer market or the corporate business or corporate businesses are a large contributor to waste in Northeast Ohio? Do we have information about who might be the largest contributors to waste, other trash, I guess is what I think we're getting at?
Let me take a guess, because I'm not scared to hurt anyone's feelings right now. I can say probably a lot of our sporting stadiums, and I'm lucky to be friends with the operations director who has been both at the Indians and the Browns, but contracts with Aramark don't allow for them to stop selling bottled water and do certain things. So there are issues there where good people within these large organizations that have tens of thousands of visitors multiple times per week, they're creating a ton of trash, and it's not sustainable.
The other industry that creates a lot of trash would be the health industry with our hospitals, and it's cleanliness issues, and I don't know of good alternatives. I mean, that's one of the wonderful uses of single-use plastics is really for our healthcare system. And so they are huge. We have University and Cleveland Clinic. We have 2 huge hospitals in this area. So they're definitely a main contributor to our waste.
And we don't really have alternative. I mean,
Yeah. It's a cleanliness issue at that point. Plastic can be sterilized and disposed of easily, and it's cheap.
So similar to that, and I can see how there could be a kind of contradicting opinion with the medical industry. You mentioned that the dental industry started the ban on microbeads. The medical industry carries a large voice. Are any of your groups getting involved with the medical industry when it comes to plastic reduction?
I think we're just starting the conversations with the health community, and we're in the introductory conversations. And so we're working with I believe it's the Alliance for Healthy Nurses. I'm sure I'm getting that wrong. But we're starting our initial conversations about what their priorities are and what ours are, and trying to come up with a shared water agenda with the health industry and business and agriculture and a number of other industries. But we are engaging health in those initial conversations with hopes that we can find synergies to work on plastic reduction together.
Well, and I would mention, too, I do know Cleveland Clinic has quite an amazing sustainability initiative, and Toby Cosgrove hates bottled water. I mean, there are good things happening in these big organizations. I just don't know the specifics.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see. A lot of audience questions to get to, so thank you so much for having questions. That helps my job. So getting back to recycling, I mean, we've been on recycling. Regarding the new regulations on what you can and can't recycle in Cuyahoga County, states in Cleveland, it's in Cleveland at least, that people will get charged fines when they recycle things that they're not supposed to recycle. Why isn't it that we don't charge people money for throwing away things we should recycle? Why isn't it that we don't charge people?
So you're being charged for improperly recycling
In Cleveland, yes,
In Cleveland.
That's a new.
And they're asking, why aren't you being charged like for your garbage?
No, why aren't you being charged for throwing away recyclables?
Yes.
Okay. And I think it's just the recycling industry changes every day. So it's a market. And so if there is a market for this certain type of plastic, there's many different types of plastic, that is what people want recycled. That market could collapse the next day. With the cost of petroleum being so low, it's cheaper to make things out of virgin plastic than to recycle plastic. So that's another issue facing our recycling industry. So oftentimes you'll see these recycling facilities, they will just have things in storage waiting for that market to change. Contamination is a huge issue with recycling. If anything is contaminated with food, that causes health and safety issues for the people working in the recycling plant. And also, if you're contaminating it with things that can't be recycled, they're not going to sit there and pick through it. There's just not enough money in the recycling market. They're going to send it to landfill because it's cheaper for them to send it to landfill than for them to pick through it. And I understand with things changing, it's very hard to keep up in your household what can be recycled and what can't, because it's just a market that changes every day. And so that's why we keep saying we really need to move away from recycling, because it's just not a user-friendly system. It isn't. But there are places. I used to live in New Hampshire. We had to buy bags. Our garbage went in that bag. Our recycling and composting was free, and so I was more inclined to recycle or compost because I had to pay for my trash. So you get very creative at what to do with your trash when you're a poor college student. So you don't have to pay $1 for the bag or something. So a lot of places do that to encourage people to not use things that would go to landfill.
Yeah, and they're not looking through the trash as like they are looking through their recycling. I mean, I was at my parents' house the other day, and they had a big, and they're in Summit County, and they had a big yellow, pink sticker on their recycle bin because my dad forgot to take the styrofoam peanuts out of a box, and so they didn't take any of his recycling. They left the whole thing there, and he's like, forget it, I ain't gonna recycle nothing then. I was like, Dad, no, Dad.
That's the wrong reaction.
And that's exactly what he said. So,
Right.
And that's not the reaction that we want. So I think that we really need to start talking with the residents about how they stay abreast of these issues. Let's be honest, if I don't go home and tell my family what the new, you can't recycle this or you can recycle that, they don't know. And
Right.
so it's we're really depending on people to have word of mouth and educate each other on what these are. So I know they're not sifting through the trash like they're sifting through the recycling, but either way, there needs to be a great deal of education happening so people are abreast of what to do, because you want to do the right thing and you find out after, you get a big pink sticker on your trash that you were doing the wrong thing. And so it's discouraging.
Anything else? I will say I did a lot of educating at Thanksgiving because that was the thing. You have to keep the lids on and everything. The Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District has a really good guide by community. Just to throw that out there.
They're doing a lot to try and educate, but it's really a very fickle market right now. So please be patient and understanding with one another and the businesses and everything.
I just want to mention one thing. My husband brought a notice that he got at his office, not at our house, last week, I think. What was the name of the company?
It was a waste service company.
A waste service company is being very... Okay. No, that's fine. But you know who you're talking to. But they're only allowed to recycle cardboard now because of what happened in China. So it might be for me, I'm like, oh, that's a sign of things to come. So we really need to think even beyond what Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District is telling us and think about how can we stop buying so much of this stuff.
Right. So do you think there's any, question from the audience, do you think there's any chance that the public will begin to feel the same about plastic bags as they have done about plastic straws? This person brings up the video of the sea turtle with the straws, stuck. Saying, like, does there need to be another viral video like that to draw attention? Do you think that would work? It's unfortunate that it has to be like that.
I mean, the images are there, and we're really trying to move away from these scare tactics, but there are images of dolphins, sharks, whales with tens to hundreds of bags in their system. So if that's not hitting home for you, I mean, I know we don't have those organisms in our lake, but really it has to come down to it's clogging up your sewers and flooding communities, and it's causing safety and health issues. And these plastic bag breaks down into these small microplastics too that you're drinking every single day. And so the messages are there. It just needs to be whether or not you're willing to change your behavior.
I don't even think it's always malicious. Like, I don't think you hate the environment because you forgot your bag at home. We gotta stop that, okay? Because I know that I go to Target and I'll forget, and my bags stay in my trunk. But then you get in the store and you Target, one thing leads to another, $100 later, and you have a whole cart and you're like, what? I don't want the plastic bag. So that's why I carry a purse that can carry at least 3 plastic bags worth in here. And it's about just remembering your bags. That's number one, because that happens so often. And then when they give you one item, no, I don't need a bag for my apple today. Before they take it off, because then once they take it off, they're going to throw it in the trash, and that's even worse. And so it's just about being conscious about it. Keep it at the front of your mind. And so we have to figure out how we do that. And we talked about that in previous conversations about whether that's something hanging from your rearview mirror, like remember your bags, or putting it in the passenger seat of your car and not in the trunk, because I'm not going to check the trunk before I go into the store. And so we have to think about that. I don't believe it's always malicious.
Yeah, and it's supporting one another. And, you see someone in the store and they've got reusable produce bags, be like, wow, those are really awesome. And, you know, just like validate people's decisions. And I'll tell you what got me. I went to the store, I had all this stuff, and I said, I teach about this. I cannot take a bag, put it in my pockets, my clothes. I mean, I had cans popping out everywhere. People were looking at me like I was crazy. Yep. Okay. And from then on, I either hand carry, use a box, or bring my bags. It was like the awkward situation that happened to me. And so maybe an awkward situation will happen with you. Your cabbage goes rolling down the parking lot. You'll bring your bags. So
one quick thing. So I'm definitely all about individual action. We vote every day with our dollars and how we live our lives. But from the top down, it's very important that we change our defaults. So as bans happen or as fees happen, these slowly change our defaults that we no longer have to think about bringing our bag anymore. We're like, oh yeah, that cost me more money. It's just here. It's like bringing your reusable water bottle everywhere. If I leave home without this, I'm like, what am I going to do? So I can't buy bottled water because I do this for a living. And I just can't. But it's about changing those defaults too, and that takes the grocery stores, it takes the bag bans or the fees, it takes all of us supporting those things to happen too.
Okay, and are you any of you looking at other countries for guidance on how to reduce plastic use? And are you looking at their tactics maybe that they've used to try and implement different? I don't know if it's just talking about laws or just generally.
Since I'm the global one here. I would say definitely Rwanda that I brought up earlier. I was fortunate enough to go there last year and got to witness this myself. So that was very inspiring. What was also inspiring that didn't have to do with laws anywhere. I make documentaries too with the work that I do, and we were in Kenya doing something, and they were digging to put in water pipes or something in a municipal area. And I looked down, and there were layers of plastic, like 20, 30 feet down, already showing our history of what we're doing. And I'm like, this is not what I want to leave behind. That was a little tangent. But, you know, we don't have crazy, corrupt African dictators in this country. So I don't know what to bring back home other than, I mean, over where I work, people are scared to do the wrong thing or some bad things happen, right? Oh yeah, I didn't mean to go there, guys. But I did. Sorry. Sorry. So, I mean, we have to have the political will, and so we do have to vote for people who understand conservation, respect science, and want clean, healthy communities for all of us. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You have to get the right people in that seat.
And there's a lot of wonderful information and resources coming from other countries working on these issues. And so really just using those as a guide and a tool as we move forward, I think is going to be really important.
Are there any resources or country that you want to highlight?
So I'm just thinking of, it's just a listserv. So it's just, I usually get like 30 emails a day. I don't read them all, but and it's just, you can pose a question to this international audience. They're experts in the field, whether they're chemists, biologists, teachers, politicians, and they just, you know, people were asking me about plastic roads, and I went to this group and got all this information on plastic roads because it's something that really hasn't come up yet in the United States, but in countries like India, it is coming up and it is a part of their conversation and they are moving forward with it. Or when we're looking at bans and stuff or fees and stuff, I'm looking at research from Australia and Canada and France to, you know, help shape the research I'm doing, but also help answer the questions that I'm getting from the people I work with.
So we have a Cleveland Heights question. I actually just had a coworker of mine talk about this because Cleveland Heights doesn't have trash bins. And so this is just kind of a personal question for this person. The litter spreading every trash day, you know, you have animals opening them, wind blowing them around. Do you have any suggestions for that other than going to council, I guess?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Cleveland Heights. Do they have bags? Yeah. Okay. Bags only.
Bags only on the curb.
The only suggestion I have for you is if you are able to, I don't know if your waste gets picked up every day at the same time, if you're able to put it out right before that, to minimize the animals like raccoons and skunks that are going to be tearing through your trash are going to come in the evening. They're crepuscular, so they're active during dawn and dusk. So if you can just make sure your trash is outside in the sunlight, that is best. But then you do risk birds. But then also they're being attracted to food smells. So if you can wash things or compost, that will make them less likely to want to go through your trash. If you can try and minimize those food smells. Or freeze, yes, thank you. That's another great suggestion.
I would say if you ever do get bins, do it better than the rest of us the first time and get small ones.
With very secure lids.
With very secure lids.
That it is so important to have secure lids on your bins.
Okay, is there a call to action that attendees tonight can commit to when it comes to reducing plastic?
Sure. I guess House Bill 625. We're waiting for it to go through the legislative process in the Senate, and so has it been referred to committee yet? No, I don't.
I believe it has
been referred to a Senate committee.
I think so.
I can look and see, but look, this is the key to all things legislative. Google Ohio legislation. If you put that in, the first website is the our Ohio legislature, and you can put in House Bill 625. You hit status, and it will tell you where the bill is in the legislative process. I believe it may have been referred to a committee. What you can start to do is start to research that bill. There should be a link that gives you a bill analysis that will break it down and give you a summary of the legislation, so that you can submit a testimony, or when the time comes, when it goes through the committee, they'll have a sponsor testimony, and then they'll have a proponent, opponent, and interested parties testimony, and you can submit testimony then. If you just want to do something right now when you get home because you're just so fired up after hearing this panel today, you can write your local legislator, your state legislator, and tell them you oppose this this bill. Whoever your senator is, your state senator, because they will have a vote on it. Even if it makes it out of the committee, they will have a vote on the floor. And you want to hold them accountable and let them know that, you know, you've elected them, and now you're going to hold them accountable to represent the interest of your neighborhood and your interest. So,
Jill, Erin, anything else?
And so really start with yourself and start with one item. For me, it was plastic bags. When I got really good at bringing my own bags into the store, I moved on to straws. I'm really good at telling wait staff at restaurants, I don't need a straw, thank you very much. My next one is when I go out to eat, to bring my own utensils and carry out containers. So start with one thing and progress from there, if that's what you think is important, and then teach other people around you about why you're doing it, why it's important to you, why it matters. And so start with yourself and, you know, work your way down the list of single-use plastics. There's plenty of them for you to tackle.
I would say walk the walk and know you're not going to be perfect. There's this thing called eco-guilt, which a lot of us get. So it's okay. Just, again, do what you can and do what you can today. Start something today. But as you're walking the walk and you're walking into your grocery store, please talk to the manager. Please write a letter. Get it on their radar. And don't stop at one time. It takes multiple times of people hearing you place a complaint or an idea to sit down and really listen. So don't give up. But start with your neighborhood and a retailer that you shop at a lot, and get comfortable talking to someone there to see if maybe they can change. Because even if, I hope we change the state of Ohio's way that we're headed, but even if we don't, you can still change something locally. No one can stop that.
Well, with retailers, is it, I'm guessing you had experience with contacting them directly. Is it harder? Should we go for the mom and pop shops or the locally owned? Or, I mean, it's going to be easier, right?
That will be easier. And at least where we are right now, the restaurants are already moving forward a little bit with this. So maybe start with restaurants, with working them to get rid of straws, or maybe switching from plastic bags with all the carry out, or if they don't use reusable, can they move towards reusable? And understand that the businesses have to make changes and have upfront costs, but start with, and then any local, places you like to shop. And that's another way you can really reduce your plastic use, is shopping locally, hand making your goods this holiday season, wrapping things that don't wrap things, or wrap things in newspaper or something like that. There's a lot of small little things you can do locally this holiday season to limit your waste impact.
May I bring up one last thing? Sorry, I'm not trying to keep getting the last word on some of this stuff. Today, the United Nations launched this bot, and I'm not really sure how to use it yet. I downloaded it a few hours ago. But what it is it operates through Facebook Messenger. And so every day when you do one of these things, like bring your own bag to the store, or you skipped a straw, or you didn't buy bottled water, you brought your own bottle for the day, you can log these things, and it feeds into a global system of information that they're just kicking off now. And I guarantee you, once people think what we're talking about is cool, the world's going to be amazing. Way more amazing than it is now.
I think one of the other barriers during our community conversations, one of the barriers to people actively engaging on these issues was that they felt like they weren't educated enough about the issue. And so what I heard time and time again throughout the conversations were, I know a little bit about it, but I don't feel confident enough to go in and talk to a local retailer. And that's totally understandable. I say do as much research as you can, and then go in and talk confidently about it. I mean, none of us are the experts at the end of the day. You know what you know what you're passionate about, and own that, and go in and talk to whoever. Whether it's a legislator that you've elected and they have to represent your interest, or a retailer that you patronize frequently, they should care about you as well. And so I don't feel like you have to know every in and out of an issue before you can speak with authority on it. Just go do it.
And after tonight's conversation, I'm going to make the commitment to, on our website, post a template letter that you can copy and paste from and use as you wish. So hopefully that can be helpful.
And then, so this forum was plastics and Lake Erie, or plastics in Lake Erie. I should have known that. So Lake Erie, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What can we say about that? Everyone wants to know.
It depends on what you're talking about. So obviously plastics, they're newer. That is a huge issue and a new issue for Lake Erie. If you're looking at things like our water quality, our river no longer catches on fire. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary. We have wonderful drinking water in Lake Erie, so that's a positive. There are more people going out and boating on the lake and swimming in the lake and fishing, doing things that you couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago. But then if you move towards algal blooms, that issue is popping up again. I think the most positive thing that we can focus on what's happening with our lake and our water quality is people are finally starting to work together. We're no longer working in silos. That happens a little bit, but we're all starting to work together on this issue to move forward so that we have a wonderful, sustainable, clean Great Lake for future generations.
And not to be Debbie Downer, but the plastics, I mean, they're going to stay there for a long time, though.
Forever.
Okay.
The lake actually, no, they're not. They'll either go into sediment or the lake flushes in 3 years, and we'll just send them to Lake Ontario.
Oh.
So let them deal with it. No. And then to the ocean. But no, so there are still issues that we're facing as a coastal Lake Erie community, but people are working together. People are interested. I'm so excited when I work with youth. They just have phenomenal ideas and to how we can solve some of these issues.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way, definitely since the river was set on fire, but we still have a long way to go, especially in the western basin of Lake Erie where we're seeing algal blooms. There are some things that need to happen primarily at the state level to really mitigate these issues and reduce the amount of agricultural runoff that we're seeing. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity, especially going into this new session in January at the state level. There are lots of things that can be done to make our lake even cleaner.
I'm specifically very concerned about climate change issues, and a lot of reports in the last month from both international agencies and national and local that are all more clearly defining kind of what's in store for us. So I encourage everybody to take a look through some of that.
Okay, and I just have one more question. We see what's going on at the state level. We see what's going on nationally. We hear the conversation or lack of conversation around change and around changing minds, changing attitudes about environmental issues, including plastics. How do you stay positive about it? How do you try not to get too down on maybe a slow-moving change?
I just get positive every day with the people I work with. Yes, I work with some people who have very negative thoughts about this, who may not agree with me, but when we're able to have these conversations with people that don't necessarily agree with us, they see a different future for where they live, that's positive steps forward. And so just in my work every day, yes, it can be sad at times, but I'm always happy with what's happening because of all the people I get to work with and all the diversity that we have around these issues. It's important progress as we move forward, and I'm hopeful that there's a great future to come for us. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Maybe you want to add anything.
I see. Did you say Erin?
Erin, could you share with us your organization's website address so if we want to go later to get that form letter, we know where to go to?
Sure. Our website is drinktap.org.
I find inspiration in my kids. Though I am extremely tired with my 1-year-old and 4-year-old, I know that I have to do something so that the world is a better place for them. And I know it sounds super cliche, but we have the luxury of what we have here today because some people fought before us. In every part of my life, I know that to be true. And so I owe it to them to go and fight, even when it looks like things aren't likely. We've seen the impossible happen so much in our country. And so I believe in this cause. I think it's the right thing to do. And we owe it to this next generation to not give up on them.
Erin, anything you want to?
I'm just so happy with the turnout this evening. This gives me hope. I operate in a tiny little office most days and don't get to be surrounded by such wonderful, interested people. And you're here because you care about your community or water or what's happening, what our future. And I'm specifically hopeful because of our younger people that are here tonight. They could have been out doing anything this evening and they came here. So that gives me hope.
All right. Well, I guess that's all I have. I just wanted to say,
I suggest all 4 of you think about running for office.
I mean, I'm good. All right. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the panelists. Thank you to all of you for coming out. Have a good night.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? Yeah.